whenever we pick up a passenger, typically we pick them up at their house and we bring them to the DMV. With my experience, it seems that it's best to drive them to the DMV first, then switch spots and allow them to practice in the area around the DMV. Just because if you practice at home, you may not encounter some of the obstacles that are around the DMV that you're going to. So here we are at Redwood City's DMV, and after switching places, I typically try to take us through the exiting route that you're going to take when you're doing your test. So here you would line up. Usually there's multiple cars. You would line up underneath in this spot, and you would stop here and wait until your tester comes. So now we're going to pull out. It's always important to turn your turn signal on, look over your shoulder when you are merging lanes with a different lane. Now here we're going to exit. There are multiple hypothetical routes that a DMV instructor could take you on. We can just pick one. You know, it's never a certainty which way they're going to take you. So today we're going to exit to the left. Always important to turn your turn signal on. Make sure you're looking both ways and head out. Now, your instructor will advise you to take a right, take a left. It's really important to listen to them and not ask, hey, are we going to go right here? Are we going to go left here? I've come into contact with many DMV instructors, and they've always said that they prefer for their clients to just, you know, be pleasant, but listen to the instructions and wait for them to give it. So that's an important part of it as well. At a red light, you can always turn right as long as it's not posted otherwise. So here on Veterans Boulevard, I can make a right turn here on the red light because there's no sign that says I cannot. Off to the left are 2 additional lanes. Usually when you're on a street that has this many lanes going the same way, they're going to ask you to show them that you can change lanes. It's always important to, what I say is, sweep to the right or sweep to the left. So you're going to look at your mirror in the front, you're going to look to your mirror to your left, and then you're going to look over your shoulder, and then you're going to change your lanes. And we're going to do that one more time. To the left. Now, I've encountered many clients who are sometimes confused as to which way they should be, which lane they should be staying in. So if you're making a left-hand turn and there are 2 left-hand turn lanes, always stay in the lane that you're in. So if it's the farthest right left-hand turn lane, you're going to stay in that lane. If it's the farthest to the left-hand turn lane, you're going to stay in that one. Also, really important things are stopping before the crosswalk. So you never want to stop in a crosswalk. That's something that is considered a critical error, especially if there are pedestrians walking in it. In addition to that, if you are going to cross over a crosswalk and there's a pedestrian that's in it, but let's say they're not near you, you could quote unquote safely make it through the crosswalk. It doesn't matter, as long as there's a pedestrian somewhere in that crosswalk that you're going to be crossing over, you have to wait until they're completely out of the crosswalk and onto the sidewalk. Another important tip is to always try to stay right around the speed limit. It's okay if you're 1 or 2 miles under, but going over, if the DMV tester sees that you've gone over, they will mark a point off. And in addition to that, if you are quite a few miles under the speed limit, the same thing applies. They will mark a point off for that. I've actually had a client who sadly failed because he was so nervous that he was driving, from what the DMV instructor told me, he was driving 10 miles under the speed limit. And the DMV considers being overcautious just as dangerous as being undercautious. So you really want to be aware of that as well. So in taking right-hand turns, you really want to try not to take the turn too sharp. When you do that, if there is a bike lane, you end up cutting that bike lane off on the new road that you're turning on, and that can be a critical error as well, especially if you're driving in areas like San Francisco where there are a ton of bike lanes. You always want to be aware. Here we're in a residential area. Residential areas are always 25 unless posted otherwise. So this street is pretty wide. I have come across streets that are a lot narrower, especially the Oakland Coliseum DMV or the Claremont DMV. Those both are quite a bit narrower than most other DMVs. The streets around them are. And when you're in that situation, it's important to remember to stay at the speed limit. I know it makes you feel like you want to drive slower, but as long as there's not another vehicle coming towards you, it's important to stay at the speed limit you're at. Because again, being overcautious is just as dangerous as being undercautious. So here we're taking a right-hand turn. The left side is blind, so I have to stop at the stop sign completely, and then I can creep forward until I can see if there are any other vehicles coming towards me or any pedestrians. There isn't, so I'm gonna make my turn. And again, I had to make a wide turn because there is a bike lane here. The only time you can enter into a bike lane is when it's not a solid white line. So when the line's broken up, like here on the right, that means that you can enter into that bike lane now. Other things that are really important when taking your test is to make sure that you keep both hands on the steering wheel. I know a lot of times, especially even myself, I grew up and was taught how to drive on a manual. So for me, I always had my hand on the gear shift. But when taking your test, it's really important to keep both hands on the wheel. It's, again, another thing that you can miss a point for. I had a gentleman a few weeks ago, really nice client. He was from France, and he grew up like I did, learning how to drive on a stick shift. And so it was really hard for him to keep both hands on the wheel. And eventually by the end of our, practice session, he was able to do it. But even during his test, he said there were a few times where he took his hands off and the instructor would remind him that he needs to keep both hands on the wheel. Sometimes you won't have a DMV instructor that is that polite. Sometimes they will just mark you off points and not say anything to you. So this route that we're taking for the Redwood City test, it's again not going to be the exact one that you will take with an instructor, but it will provide you with the knowledge of the type of areas that they're going to test you in. So a lot of times they want to check to make sure that you know how to safely proceed around bike lanes. They want to make sure that you can make right and left hand turns, that you are stopping completely at stop signs, allowing pedestrians to walk across in crosswalks. All these things seem sometimes minuscule to us, things that should be just habit, but it's good to go over and get a refresher before you take your test. Now, when you're at a solid green light like we are right now, you always have to wait for oncoming traffic as well as pedestrians or bicyclists that are crossing. So we were lucky that there wasn't a long line of cars, but I have encountered with other clients who weren't sure what to do and sometimes would turn their wheels in to the left as if they were starting to make their turn, but we're still going to wait for the oncoming traffic. That is something that you can't do as well, because the instructor will notice that your wheels are turned to the left. You will end up missing points for that. And sometimes if you're merging forward so much so and your wheels are turned to the left as if you're going to make the left, the DMV instructor could feel that you're about to make the turn and then would intervene. Anytime that a DMV instructor has to intervene, it's an automatic fail, a disqualification. It's really important to be aware of your surroundings. I know sometimes it's very nervous and nerve-wracking when you are taking your test, and sometimes you're so focused on the road and just what's in front of you and making sure that you're not trying to, or that you're not doing any mistakes. But it's also important to notice especially the people around you, because sometimes they will walk out in front of you without being in a crosswalk, and you're not noticing and you don't see them, and then you have to slam on your brakes in order to stop for them. Things like that, though were not your fault because you were following the rules, are things that could potentially cause you to miss more points on your test. When you're pulling up and stopping behind cars, you always want to make sure that you can see the tires of the car in front of you. So the rear tires of the car in front of you. I know sometimes some DMV instructors are okay with you just seeing the license plate, but it's really important to give enough space between you and the car in front of you. Also, I think probably the most important thing that I could stress when taking your test is looking over your shoulders to the right, to the left. Whenever you're taking a turn, you absolutely, even if there are no lanes next to you on the left, you absolutely have to look to your right or your left. I've had clients who have done an extremely excellent job when doing their test, and because right before they entered into the DMV, they crossed over a bike lane and they didn't look to the right or to the left to make sure that there were no bikes coming, they ended up failing right at that last moment. The next thing that we're going to do is practice pulling up to a curb and reversing. This again, you need to turn your turn signal on, look over your shoulder, and then make your way to the curb. You always want to make sure you're at least 12 inches or less away from the curb. And they like for you to either be looking at your right side mirror or behind you when you're reversing. They usually will ask you to reverse for, you know, about a half a block or so. They want to see that you can keep it straight, that you're not going to curve, and as well as that you're going at a decent speed and not just crawling or not speeding going in reverse. So now that we've finished with the reversing portion, we're going to turn the turn signal on again to the left. You're going to look in, you're going to sweep to the left. You're going to look in your rear view mirror, you're going to look in your left side mirror, and then you're going to look over your shoulder and make sure there are no vehicles coming, and then move out into traffic. It's always important to remember that when pulling into a curb or pulling away from a curb, you have to look over your shoulder, and the very first thing you should do is turn your turn signal on. Turning your turn signal on informs the cars behind you that you're going to be making a change of a lane. So even if you're waiting to change your lane and there's cars coming, it's still important to turn the turn signal on and keep it on until you've changed that lane. Also, I've heard from many instructors from the DMV that once they tell you to make a right or a left or change lanes or pull up to a curb, when they tell you that, that's when you should turn your turn signal on. So don't wait until it's too late. Don't turn it on, you know, right before you turn. Just the moment that they ask you to change or deviate from the lane that you were in, turn your turn signal on right then. So now we're back at the DMV, and after the practice, we then come back, we will park. I mean, we're lucky right now, it's an empty DMV parking lot. That doesn't happen. But we'll find somewhere to park, and then we will go inside. You'll bring your permit, and I bring my information like the car registration, the insurance, and my ID. We'll go into the line specifically for drive tests. And usually, if we're lucky, it's not too many people in front of us, sometimes no one in front of us, and we'll be able to check you in. We'll come back out into the car. You'll get back into the driver's seat. Once you do, we will pull into the same lanes that we started with same 2 lanes that we started with when we first started this video. So now you would be driving. We would drive up. Drive under the overhang or behind the cars, depends on how many vehicles are in front of you. And you would sit and wait until the DMV instructor comes out and tells you it's time to take your test. And that's it. Once you've finished your test, the last thing that you'll do with the instructor is park in one of the reserved spaces for the end of drive test. Always want to make sure that you're going in slow. You never want to have an incident to where you hit the front pillar. And that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video.